Well, welcome everybody to Last Week Tonight. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's John Oliver. I always want to do that. Welcome to the current. We are so happy you could all join us today for our God Connect service, a service that's designed to be interactive and to hopefully connect us all to God and through God to each other. A couple of quick announcements. I'm trying a completely different setup today, so I appreciate your patience as we try to constantly, continually improve the service. And if you want to hang out for a couple of minutes afterwards and let me know what worked and what did not for you, I'll use those comments to fine tune it for next week as well. But we will begin today, as we always do, with a moment that we call tuning. This is just an opportunity for us to take a couple of minutes to let go of all of the stresses and problems of the week, and they have been plentiful, I'm sure. So we can all take just a few deep breaths and exhale all of the troubles and distresses of the week and spend just a few moments tuning into the presence of God, which is, of course, flowing through us and around us all the time, but which is a presence that sometimes we forget to just sort of acknowledge and let flow through our lives. So as we enter into this time of worship, let's begin by spending just a few moments feeling and internalizing the presence of God. This is just a couple of minutes of silence. I'll ring a bell 3 times to sort of bring us into tuning, and then I'll ring a bell again 3 times to bring us out of tuning. So let's take just a couple of moments to tune in to the presence of God. staying in this space, let's join our voices together in our opening unison prayer. Holy, infinite God, we sense your presence and it ignites our souls. Tune us with your creative energy until we resonate with divine compassion. Stimulate every molecule of our being with love. Motivate, move, and love us through every yesterday, in every today, and to every tomorrow. Amen. Yes, I forgot to mention something. I forgot to mention one thing. You might want to play with your Zoom views today and toggle back and forth between speaker view and grid view. I know most of us probably leave it in grid view, but because I'm trying to make this more broadcast-like, if you put it in speaker view, you'll get a larger image, and then maybe go to grid view for our discussion. So let's join our voices together in song.
From God, through God, to God, are all things. From God, through God, to God, are all things. To God be the glory. To God be the glory forevermore, forevermore. From God, through God, to God, are all things. From God, through God, to God, are all things. To God be the glory. To God be the glory forevermore, forevermore.
Our scripture reading today is from the Gospel of John, chapter 18. The Jewish leaders led Jesus from Caiaphas to the Roman governor's palace. It was early in the morning. So that they could eat the Passover, the Jewish leaders wouldn't enter the palace. Entering the palace would have made them ritually impure. So Pilate went out to them and asked, "What charge do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If he had done nothing wrong, we wouldn't have handed him over to you." Pilate responded, "Well, take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jewish leaders replied, "The law doesn't allow us to kill anyone." Now this was so that Jesus' word might be fulfilled when he indicated how he was going to die. So Pilate went back into the palace. He summoned Jesus and asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this on your own, or have others spoken to you about me?" Pilate responded, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your nation and its chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus replied, "My kingdom doesn't originate from this world. If it did, my guards would fight so that I wouldn't have been arrested by the Jewish leaders. My kingdom isn't from here." And then also, "So you are a king," Pilate said. And Jesus answered, "You say that I'm a king. I was born and came into the world for this reason, to testify to the truth. Whoever accepts the truth listens to my voice." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. After Pilate said this, he returned to the Jewish leaders and said, "I find no grounds for any charge against him." And also this from Nietzsche, "There are no facts, only interpretations." Well, this is a very interesting conversation that takes place in the Gospel of John. It's not a question of legality or theology, which is sort of the study of the nature of truth. Instead, it's a statement about the way humans interpret information and make distinctions between fact and fiction. And what Pilate is suggesting is that we don't. We don't make a distinction between fact and fiction. Pilate's final question to Jesus, what is truth, couldn't be more profound. Read in context, this is a question not about Jesus's guilt or innocence, but how we as human beings perceive the world around us. It's essentially an ethics question posed by a representative of an empire to a rebel attempting to overthrow their reign and replace it with God's. Jesus's people, the Jewish people, lived under Roman occupation. They mostly accepted the consequences of this reality, although occasional armed skirmishes show that they didn't necessarily like it. Jesus, who's much more highly attuned to God than anyone else around him, than anyone else ever, perhaps, sees through Roman reality. He sees reality as purely temporal, something that can be changed by perceiving, thinking, and believing differently. Jesus understood that the way we humans view reality as that's just the way it is profoundly affects our spiritual well-being. By acquiescing to the currently accepted thinking, we participate in the perpetuation of a reality that is often not in our best interests or those of our global community or the welfare of the planet. What is truth? It's whatever you've been told that resonates with your preconceived notions, most likely. So to that concept, persistent to this day, Jesus says, yeah, no. Remember, before Pilate asks his weighty question, Jesus makes a statement that's even more mind-bending, yet reveals precisely what he thinks about the nature of human truth. My kingdom doesn't belong to this world. What does that mean? Does it mean that Jesus came from another planet? Is Jesus giving us a clue that he understands the multidimensional nature of reality and that he's a visitor from another realm? Well, I mean, these are both possible, and I've previously interpreted this passage in that manner. But it's also important to recognize that both Jesus and Pilate are making political statements. For Pilate, truth is whatever the government tells you, perhaps even what the people want to believe, whether it's true or not. For Jesus, there's only one truth, God's unconditional and universal love. Now, one would think Jesus would easily win this argument, yet here we are 2,000 years later, and it persists. The lies of empire eclipse the truth of Jesus. Well, why does this happen? Especially if Jesus is an enlightened master, revealing an incredible new way to live in human community. Why does the crowd so rapidly throw Jesus to the dogs of Rome and organized religion? Well, to answer that, let's move forward in history a little bit, because the advent of the printing press clearly illustrates why humans are so susceptible to lies. There's a fabulous new TV series called The Great. Now, here's a disclaimer. It's a very lewd show with a lot of vulgar language, so it's not for everyone. But it's also a brilliant, fictionalized account of the rise of Catherine the Great in Russia. Early in the series, Catherine introduces a printing press to the royal court, insisting that freedom of speech is a hallmark of modernity and necessary to begin educating the Russian population. She's correct, of course, but instead of philosophy and poetry, people immediately start printing bawdy photos and spreading vicious rumors about the empress. Rumors that persist to this day, by the way. So naturally, the court removes the printing press. Well, sometime later, Catherine meets the Queen of Sweden, a country in which the free press is firmly established and still running. And while discussing the implications of a free press, she remarks, "Oh yes, we quickly learned that the first lie wins." What is truth? Too often, it's the first lie wins. It turns out that people will believe what resonates with them, not necessarily what is true. We'll even believe outright lies. One need only turn on a cable news channel to see the truth of that. These days, we're even told there are alternative facts. as preposterous, nonsensical, and illogical a notion as there ever was. But there were alternative facts in Jesus' day too, which is why Pilate asks his question, what is truth? Knowing full well that the truth is whatever the masses will believe. Of course, sometimes the truth presented by an authority is just as vicious as a lie. For example, this Jesus is a rabble-rouser, an insurgent, a blasphemer, and a heretic. Both religious and civic leaders proclaimed of Jesus, and then the crowd goes, okay. And then the disciples go, okay, because they still didn't understand what truth is, even when it was standing before them in the flesh. Jesus understood the danger of lies for both our individual spiritual well-being and communal peace. By acquiescing to currently accepted thinking, which is often a consequence of a persistent first lie, perhaps hundreds or thousands of years old, we participate in the continuation of a reality that is often not in our best interests, the interests of our global community, or the health of our aching planet. Truth, for Jesus, as it should be for his disciples, is found only in the unconditional revelatory love of God. To experience and live into God's love like Jesus, we have to realize that if we are stubbornly attached to an absolute truth, it perhaps needs re-examining and testing against God's unconditional love. We need to consider where we first heard something we believe, who said it, their context, and their motive. In our contemporary era, where facts are increasingly irrelevant, it's incumbent upon all followers of Jesus to perform this love litmus test all the time. We must ferociously examine our hearts, minds, and actions and ask, is this love? And if the answer makes us uncomfortable or forces us to rethink a truth, then it probably is. Amen. Okay, my friends, as usual, we'll take a couple of minutes to ponder, and I'll send you into some small group rooms to discuss the concept of what is truth, what are facts, and how it all feeds into our spiritual well-being. I know that you're going to have a good time with this, and I can't wait to have you back to see exactly what you talked about. Let's see, we'll divide this into, let's see, there's, let's try this and see how it works. And all right, my friends, have a great conversation. I'll see you in about 10 minutes.
Check to push join.
Let me not catch the house on fire.
Trudy, I thought you'd be up at your mom's.
I am on call. I'm waiting to go any second to pick her up. I'm not
Oh.
allowed to go. I'm not allowed to see her in the hospital, you know.
Oh, she's still in the hospital now.
Yeah.
I thought
She
she might
said-
have been up by now.
No, she should have been. She's had a lot of setbacks,
Oh
unfortunately.
dear.
Thank
Okay.
you for your thoughts, though.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm sure this was a fascinating discussion. I wish I could like eavesdrop on these, excuse me,
Drop in.
discussions. Just drop in and see what's happening. But this is why we get back together so we can share our thoughts with one another. You're welcome to share your thoughts, or you can share what you talked about at the table. I know that some people are a little less extroverted than others. So however you'd like. What came up in conversation? Does the first lie win, or does just the first thing you hear win? Or go ahead, Meg. Don't forget to unmute.
I think it's more the first story it wins. But Sean brought up an interesting point that you may think it's a lie. It's not necessarily a lie to someone else. Is there one truth? Does it have to be true to everyone to be a truth?
Well, this is the question, isn't it? What is truth? Is there a difference between truth and facts? Gary. Don't forget to unmute, my friend. Unmute.
Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me?
Excellent.
I use the law school example of what they do to first year law students. They often will have a couple of people come in and shoot blanks at the professor. And it may be one people, it may be several people, it may be a black person, it may be an Asian person. And then they'll break the class up into small groups and have them take a statement from one another as to what they observed. And everyone has a different observation. Some will hear 2 or 3 shots, some will hear 1 shot, some will see a black person, some will see a white person, some will see an Asian person. A lot of it depends on what their perception of reality is. And the truth to you is what your perception of reality is. And everyone's perception of reality is motivated by what you have learned over your lifetime and what built-in prejudices you come. Not prejudices in a bad way, but just leanings or the way you see your worldview to be. So, and that's the way you perceive reality. So if it's an auto accident or it's a killing or a shooting, you're going to see it the way your prior experiences tell you it is. There's a lot of that happening, by the way. There's a lot of alternate reality in politics today. If alternate reality exists and alternate truths, they say, well, there's only one truth. Yes, there's only one truth, but everyone can have their own different independent truth of what they perceive reality to be. If you're trying to persuade someone, like a jury, what you're doing is their combined perception of reality. What really happened doesn't matter at all. It's what the jury's perception of reality is.
So again, I'm hearing that truth and facts are different things. Interesting. Charlotte.
That ties, Gary, into a research project I did in grad school where you prep students before they read the text. And based on the type of prep you gave them and the emphasis you gave them, they got meaning from that text related to your prep, not to what the text actually said.
Interesting. Helen.
I was just thinking of that TV show, Bull. And isn't that what he does? He goes in and he interviews the jury, people that are going to be there. And that's what he uses their psyche to change. And they know what these people are thinking. And this is what we were talking about. Where do you put love into it? When you go to this text, I think this is what Jesus was saying. They didn't use love, the king or the guy that was prosecuting him said, who do you think, I am? And so Jesus says, I belong to God, but he didn't put it that way. He says, my kingdom is not here. My kingdom is, so, and that's right, what Gary said, our perception, and we were just talking about that, how we perceive things. We don't think it's prejudice or we don't think it's racism, but all of a sudden it creeps in. So, but I think of that TV show Bull, and when you watch it, you get that because that's what they do. They go in and interview these people that are going to be on the jury, and so what is truth? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Nancy?
And I think it's so important, like what Gary was saying, it's this implicit bias that we don't even know, right? Until we start doing our own inner work. I was sharing with the group, it's like, part of mine, it's not like thinking, am I a racist? It's where is racism showing up in my life as I keep educating myself, and it's like, wow, I didn't even realize, this whole new perspective opening and the implicit bias because of my upbringing, right?
Yep. Dan?
I think one of the most interesting parts of this scripture is that the Jewish leadership couldn't kill with their laws, but they wanted someone else to kill. What does that tell you?
Truth is relative.
That is not a good statement for religion.
Religion is definitely relative.
Of when we lived in central Illinois, and the Amish would go to their Mennonite friends to get rides to town or to make a phone call, but they wouldn't have it themselves.
Right. Matt?
I'm struck when Jesus is dealing with kingdom, and Roman power was about place and things and material kinds of stuff is the truth of that power. But again, Jesus said in other parts, people will say, lo, it's over here or there, but the kingdom of God is within you. So that sense of the power of selfless love is a truth that frankly Rome would have a terrible time trying to understand. And I struggle myself. And I was noting that Joseph Fletcher made it the very key to how we make moral and ethical decisions, whatever the most selfless, loving thing is in a given situation, a denial kind of thing. And that's a struggle, much more difficult than having a commandment, much more difficult than all the 10. And so I think about that as the truth and the power by which I constantly struggle to try to live by and decisions I make.
Yeah, amen. Nancy?
Just this simple, image, right? The truth, the glass, is it half empty or half full? It's the same thing, but it's the way that they're both truths about the same thing, right? But it's like, I think about in Philippians, whatever is good, lovely, pure, think on these things. Is because when we change the way we look at things, these things in our life literally change.
Yes.
The quote you had. Interpretation.
This is really sort of the point of Pilate's question, right? He's asking, not rhetorically, he's asking knowing full well that his truth, Jesus's truth, the truth of the Jewish leadership and the truth of the people in the crowd are all completely different. And none of them are either totally right or totally wrong. They're just perspectives, right? Which is why often I think when we say we're searching for the truth, Jack Nicholson's right when he says we can't handle the truth. Because as Mac points out, the truth is about sacrificial love, really. Ultimately, I think the truth that Jesus shows, the undeniable, perhaps objective truth, although nothing may be objective, but for Jesus, I think the objective truth is sacrificial love. If what we're doing is about sacrificing for the love of the common good, then I think he would say that that's true. That's a spiritual truth, right? The other things that we talk about tend to be about facts and fiction. And that's a whole different category of discussion, right? But we mix it up all the time. We mix up truth and facts all the time. We say, well, this is a fact and this is true. But, facts don't necessarily have anything to do with truth, and vice versa, as Gary so succinctly pointed out, right? The law is a terrific example because it's less about the truth of what happened than it is about the group perception or being able to convince the group of a particular perception of something. And this is why this statement, the first lie wins, is so powerful, especially in this day and age. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a lie. It can just be the first thing. I mean, we can look at the Bible for this too. Look at Paul. Paul's ideas about Jesus become gospel, but he's not necessarily telling the truth about Jesus. He's certainly not telling the facts, but he's first and he's the loudest. So he becomes the standard. What else? Barbara's laughing. So,
Barbara had some.
Barbara, you got something? Go ahead, please.
All right. I was just thinking of, for me anyway, when I watch Call the Midwife, it's like going to church. No offense to you, Michael, or anybody else. I just go to church when I watch Call the Midwife, because it's over and over. It's about love, love, love. And a recent episode, one of the Anglican nuns was caring for a woman through her pregnancy, and then this was during the thalidomide time, and she birthed a child with no limbs, none, and you couldn't even tell no genitals, what sex it was. And she had to struggle and pray and talk to her sisters to say, is it okay to lie to this woman? And she did. I don't have to go into the whole story, but she did, because she did it out of love. And it was a good episode. But what is true? What's the truth?
Yeah. Yeah, what's the truth? What's a lie? And have you ever seen the movie The Invention of Lying? Anybody? I would recommend that movie to everyone. Watch it, because first of all, it makes a beautiful statement about religion and some things that many of us in this group might find untenable about religion, but it's presented in such a way that you go, that's actually, whether it's true or not, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to believe. So there, especially with religion, there's a great deal of fluidity in what is true and what is necessary, say, for our spiritual development, right? Are there any objective truths? Or is everything just perception? Mac? Got to unmute.
Think, which was written.
There we go. Start over.
Irving Janis, in his book Victims of Groupthink, which is, I think, published in the 60s, says it's whatever you get the majority to believe. And if everybody can come together and believe this truth enough, it doesn't it's regardless whether it's true or not. And that leads to some of the greatest fiascos in history of people who came together and thought this was the truth, whether it's the bombing of Pearl Harbor, whether it's Watergate, whatever it may be. As long as they all believed it was the truth, the Bay of Pigs invasion, et cetera, and I think that continues to be true. It's whatever the majority seem to believe that it is at a point. And so in that sense, no, there's probably no objective truth at that point out there.
And do you find that difficult to deal with, or is it somewhat freeing? Because to a certain extent, postmodernism is a push against objective truth, either the objective truth of the church or the objective truth of the government or the objective truth of science, right? Postmodernism sort of pushes back at all of those and says, maybe not. Is that difficult? Do you think that makes things difficult?
I think it makes it scary.
That's for sure.
And, you know, I did a study in graduate school on what happens in bull sessions. And if you put somebody in a bull session who has an opposing view, if it's something that it's a new truth to people in that group, it can change the argument, whether it's true or not. On abortion, for example, we put somebody in and said, you know, well, Beethoven's mother was supposed to have an abortion, but she chose not to. Suppose she would have, we wouldn't have had Beethoven. Well, that's a lie. But people in the bull session group believed it.
Right. Right. And this is where fact and fiction and truth and lies start to bleed over, and why it becomes such a difficult concept, right? Things that we thought were facts historically, after a couple more decades of research, we realized we were totally wrong about, right? For example, it was long held belief that that people during Jesus's era were illiterate. Well, it turns out that's not really true. Everybody was basically educated. They could all basically read and write at least a little bit, because they were keeping track of market products and inventory and things like that. So they weren't quite as illiterate as we thought, you know. And for me, truth is revelatory and continuous. It's something we learn about. If there is an objective truth to the universe, we are incapable of discovering it at this point. It's beyond our perception, right? But throughout, as we progress, as we evolve as human beings, I think we get a better and better handle on at least the subjective truth of this reality, even if there isn't an overarching objective truth to all reality, or anything other than maybe God's, right? And to be able to perceive that from God's point of view would sort of defeat the point of being human. So to me, the issue with answering this question is how we exist in a society when we get to the point where everybody thinks they know the only and objective truth, and you can no longer have a discussion about what is or is not correct about that point of view, right? Everybody's entitled to their point of view, but when your point of view is based on something that is provably incorrect, then what do? This is a problem. Audrey.
I think that, you know, even in the most difficult situations, when people really think that they know the truth and they're like very fully convinced of that, I feel like no matter what, at least in my experience, I don't know, maybe it's a part of being human. I don't think there's ever going to be a shortage of people that want to like express how they feel, like why they feel a certain way. Even if they can't say these are the facts, they can at least say I feel, you know, like this happened or that happened, and this is why I feel this way. And actually, I wanted to bring up something that I think your name is Barbara. I think she said, if it's okay, is it okay if I talk a little bit about what you talked about? So she mentioned what we were talking about, you know, unveiling our own lenses that we're seeing the world, because every single thing that we've seen and heard and experienced has brought us to this moment. So either consciously or subconsciously, we are being affected moment to moment by those experiences. So we were talking about when you get to the point where, and I really relate to Barbara about this, because she said she's at the point now where she's able to have more open conversations with people, and be a little bit more, you know, empathetic and open to hearing why they feel a certain way, even if it's like totally vastly different from her, especially with all the chaos that's happening and race injustice and all of that, having those conversations. But then the problem is, it's like understanding, I'm having a hard time expressing it through words, like understanding why they, you know, that they feel so differently, and it's because of all of those lenses and all those things, but then having compassion when they're acting certain ways anyway. like not just feeling this way and wanting to talk through it. And to be honest, this is separate from what she said, something I'm just thinking of now, but like when that is expressed, not even inherently that they're wanting to change it or whatever, just expressing it, you know, and then moving forward from that, like listening to them and letting them be heard, but how, like, accepting that that's not going to be changed. And like they're still going to act out in the world and do certain things and say certain things.
Yes, compassion. I think you're talking a lot about compassion, which is also part of the key to what Jesus has to say to Pilate as well. You know, it's about a compassionate response to people in order to help them maybe see a larger truth, right? Or a more inclusive truth, right? Humans love to sort of move back into our little groups, our little groups of like-minded people. I mean, we do it throughout our entire lives. In high school, we hang out with cliques, or we're musicians, we all hang out in the band room, or we're all athletes, we hang out in the gym or on the football field. You know, we tend to hang out with people who have similar interests, which is fine because we learn from each other. You know, I learned a lot of music from other musicians. I still do. But when that becomes the only thing that we accept as reality, it's a problem. It would be, we get what we have right now, where we have a world where everybody has lived in these little cliques that largely have to do with ethnicity, because it's not really race. We are a single race. It's ethnicity that we have a problem with. And because we tend to stay in these enclaves, or we've been forced into these enclaves, as we start to wake up and see each other as a human race, all beloved and equal by God, our enclaves resist. Certainly many of us in our enclaves resist, because this is a new truth for us. And while it may be more true than what we believed before, it is not in human nature to just say, wow, I have to think about this differently. Not generally. Most of us have to be sort of dragged into a new reality. That's why progress happens slowly. That's why something like the printing press didn't take off immediately, because you had to drag these old world systems that had complete control over information into a new reality where information was now distributed amongst the people. And we're still struggling with that, quite frankly. We've never really adjusted to that. And again, this goes to what Pilate and Jesus are talking about as well. What is truth? It's really whatever gets distributed first, you know. And then it's really difficult to change that. But I would suggest that our job as followers of Jesus, as people who believe in an overarching truth of love that we call God, that part of our task as disciples is to help gently nudge people into this new reality that is so obviously emerging today, because new realities don't come about without conflict. This reality didn't even start before an explosion happened, the Big Bang. Cosmic change requires friction, and it's always challenging. So I hope that we can see, not only that we can see, but that we will all work hard to help keep this new reality that's breaking in, a continuation of the reality that started breaking in with the birth of Jesus, that we can keep it moving forward by focusing on the truth of love. Meg.
I think it's our responsibility as human beings to consistently question our truth.
Amen.
If we could get everybody to do that, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Well, yeah, no, exactly, because we would all be willing to question what we believe, right? It's very difficult. Good stuff, folks. Any other comments? Audrey.
I'm sorry. I know
No,
I'm pushing
awesome.
time, but I just wanted to say something that, you know, you were talking about made me like think, you know, about, you know, the first story we hear, the first truth we hear, and all this stuff. Personally, in my life, I think about the things that are going around me that are very, very problematic, and I think about where they might have stemmed from, right? And I think, and this, I don't like, I even feel weird saying I think, because it's like, it feels like such a serious truth to me, and I know it will to probably everybody on here. But my gosh, sorry, my head is not working very well. Oh, these external positions of power have a lot to do with where we're at. A lot, you know, and it's really hard because as a human race, I think down to our core, we all have this feeling, or at least, you know, we start out with this feeling as before we're finding our individualism and, you know, what we believe and all this stuff. We're looking around. We're looking at the external positions of power. What's the truth? What do I follow? What do I do? What do I believe? We already have this kind of like imminent trust. And it's kind of like a part of our journey. Okay, do we continue to trust? How do we even get to the point where we even question, do we continue to trust? Do people get to that point? It all plays into it. It's just a whole nother facet.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, and it's a brilliant observation, because again, this is what's happening between Pilate and Jesus, right? Pilate absolutely represents those external power truths, those external powers that tell you this is what's true, whereas Jesus represents the ultimate truth of God, which is within. So we have to learn how to listen to the truth within us and be able to discern that it's a spiritual truth and not just something we think because of the way we grew up or the environment in which we grew up, or because of other external power sources that have told us this is the truth. When we really, really start focusing on God, we start to find a very different way to associate with one another based on what I believe is the only universal truth, God's unconditional love. I mean, unconditional. All right, my friends, this is a lot of stuff to take in, as usual. I can't thank you enough for so honestly, openly, and rawly sharing your thoughts, your emotions. Thank you so much. Let's move into, because I want to be sort of cognizant of everybody's time. Some people have been here since 9 a.m. Let's move into our check-in, and then we'll end today with a song, but I won't play one in between for now. Let's just move into our check-in time. Honey, our community circle.
Yes, just to switch gears, I want to say Happy Father's Day to everyone that's
totally
here
forgot.
gathered today. And along those lines, I thought for our check-in today, if we could just go around and maybe say the name of someone that you honor, either as your own father or someone in your life that is a father, or like someone that puts out that fatherly love into the world. So it's just the name of anyone that you would like to speak today. So let's just take a few seconds, think about that, and then we'll get started.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I would like to actually say Randy, and also Michael, for the father that he is to our kids.
Oh, thank you. That's nice. For me, I have to tell you, I'm just going to be honest. The father thing is difficult. I have a lot of people that I sort of consider mothers, and I'm thrilled about that. I guess the closest thing I also have to a father figure, believe it or not, is Kathy O'Connell. She's like a father-mother figure to me. So there you go. I'm gender neutral. Meg.
Well, it's as much about grandfathers. And Gary has always been a grandfather to my children. And if I could go like grandpas or us and pick one out for them, he'd be it. So happy Father's Day, Gary.
That's terrific. I totally get that. Grace, you're next on my screen.
Brett. I would say Brett. He's
Cool.
one of my 4 kids. I'm so proud of his fathering gifts.
Beautiful. Martha. Hi.
Hi. I would have to say my father. He was an amazing man.
Beautiful. Thank you. Alex?
My friend Gary Fosco, and you've met him. He's like the dad.
It's so true. He is. Thanks, Alex. Dan and Pat, don't forget to unmute.
I'd like to say my dad has been gone for a long time, but he's still always with me in my heart.
I have to say Patty's dad too, because he grew up with no family and turned out to be just a wonderful father.
Thank you. Dorothy.
Lately, of course, because of Father's Day, I've been thinking of all the things my dad did for me. He was a depression baby and had a very hard life. They moved, he's one of 10, and they moved about every 3 months because they didn't pay the rent. And yet he gave me a very stable home. And I think of things we did that still react in my life.
Beautiful. Thank you. JB.
I would have to agree with Alex and say Gary Fusco. He's been a dear friend of mine for a long time, and he and the whole family are just centered around him.
Thanks, JB. Small world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Barry and Charlotte?
Well, I think of my father sometimes. He maybe not in the sense that he provided everything, that clearly, but I think that he offered choice. And I think that's, what a real, father does is offer choice.
For me, my first thought, being a firstborn child, was my dad, because I had a great relationship with many of the male figures in my family. And so he showed me what a relationship with an opposite sex could be like, as far as being a partner. And also Barry, because he's more of a modern partner, especially the way he stepped in to help care for the children.
Thank you. Terrific. Hugh and Barbara.
I'm thinking of my father, Roy, but I'm also thinking of my two grandfathers, both of whom were named Hugh.
Neat.
I would have to put Hugh out there because he's been a good father to our 5 children over the years and took over as father for my 3 young children when we got married and after their father died. And that's not an easy job to do, but I admire him for that. He's been a good compass for them.
He's been a good compass for me too. Thank you. Mac and Joyce? Mac's kind of a father figure to me too, actually.
Very kind. My birth father, who got me to age 15 and then he was killed. And the one who really got me and developed me as a man was a man by the name of Ken Shank, and I honor them both.
Beautiful.
And I would have to say my dad, Clem, and also my husband, Mac.
Thank you. Helen.
I'm going to go with a different one. I have a grandson who's in the millennium age, and I'm really proud of him. He, as my daughter, when they were divorced, I came in and took, over. So this poor fellow, at his young age, he's in his 30s, has 3 women that were in the house, and so you know how that is. But we wondered, but here now he has got 1 little girl who gets divorced, and they're having another one due in September. And he's in the Navy, and I'm really, really proud of him. He really has. So that's a new generation. I think that might help, like Audrey, who's young. to know that there are some good young men coming up. And my dad, too. I always remember my dad. Thank you.
Thank you, hon. Jane, maybe you and Dan are there? Or maybe just listening? It's okay. Excuse me. Audrey. Oh, no, here comes Jane. Go ahead.
Our two sons, Jason and my son-in-law, Paul. They're loving, nurturing, caring people, and it makes my heart smile when we go over to see our grandchildren, the way they tenderly take care of our grandchildren. And it knows when I leave here, they're going to be in good hands. They're going to be in good hands, good hands, good hands.
This is Jane. I would have to say my grandfather, who I affectionately call Pop-Up, and to my wonderful husband, Dan. He is a great father to all of our children and a wonderful grandfather.
Thank you. Audrey, any father figures?
Sorry.
It's all good.
My breath.
You can pass if you want to.
I'd like to say my dad. His name is Troy. His physical life ended a little bit over a year ago. And there's so much that I could say, but I'm just going to say for most of my life that he was here. I resented him. And that showed. But before his physical life ended, he knew that I didn't anymore. And that's what matters most. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing so freely. Let's move into a time of prayer. You can keep all of these names that we've mentioned just now in prayer, and we'll also keep these people in prayer as well today. Of course, we're praying for our first responders, healthcare workers, service industry workers, field hands and farmers, scientists, thought leaders, and everyone keeping our infrastructure working. And we're also praying for the following individuals: Linda Kincaid, Joe Palamba, Joy McLaughlin, the Street family, the Ray family, Martha Cecere, Mary White, Thomas McGinnis, Gabriel Arndt, Dan Seneco, Kathleen Kircher, Ann Gallagher, Bob Ayers, Robin Jarvis, Guillermo Gota, Kevin Jackson, Pauline Arsenault, Beverly Rogerson, Charles Legere, Michael Morris, Richard Connor, Leslie Cole, and the victims, especially the children, of wars, disasters, and violence, both natural and systemic, worldwide. Today, I'm also trying a little prayer time experiment. For about 2 minutes, we'll listen to a chant from the abbesses in France, and then we'll leave a few moments of silence just to hold all of these people and all of our joys and concerns in prayer. Let's take all of our entire being to God. Well, my friends, I think that we have exemplified the idea of communion here today by sharing so openly with each other in this communal experience. So I will just remind everybody that that last night that Jesus gathered for Passover with his community in the upper room, he took some bread and he gave thanks for it. He blessed it, he broke it, and he passed it amongst his disciples, saying, "Take and eat from this bread. And from now on, every time you eat from this bread, remember me. Remember what I have taught you about being a divinely connected human being in a world that so readily rejects divine connection. Remember the way I've acted and act similarly with compassion and justice and love for everyone. And importantly, remember that this bread is a symbol of the body of God, unconditionally shared with every single one of us. Will you join me in sharing in the body of God now?" In a similar manner, he took a cup and he gave thanks for it. He blessed it. And he passed it to his disciples, saying, "Take and drink from this cup. And as you drink from this cup, and every time you drink from this cup, remember me. Remember what I have taught you about God's love that connects all of us together unconditionally. Remember that the liquid in this cup represents that love of God that flows between all human beings without condition and without exception." So to this day, when we come to this table, we remember what Jesus taught us about the body and love of God and its unconditional sharing intrinsic nature. And when we remember the things that Jesus taught us, we remember who Jesus is. And when we remember who Jesus is, we remember who we are. Let's share in the love of God. Why do we do a song?
Life is a prayer, a song of God, holiness, sing it everywhere. Life is a prayer, a song of God, holiness, sing it everywhere. Everything we are, everything we do. Life is a prayer, sing it out to you. Everything we are, and everything we do. Life is a prayer, sing it out to you. Life is a prayer, a song of God, holiness, sing it everywhere. Life is a prayer, a song of God, holiness, sing it everywhere. Everything we are, everything we do. Life is a prayer, sing it out to you. Everything we are, and everything we do. Life is a prayer, sing it out to you.
All right, I got to go outside and do one thing.
Thank you for joining us today. It's been unbelievably inspiring, as it always is, but I really appreciate everybody's willingness to think so deeply and to share so openly. Just a couple of announcements before we depart. I'll remind you that every Wednesday we have Intersect online at 12 noon. That's here in our virtual church. We usually stream that to Facebook Live as well. But if you want to be interactive about it with us, please meet us here every Wednesday at noon. Also, the Zoom Playground at 2 p.m. has been fascinating, and it's also given me a chance to work out some technical things as well. So if you want a more casual experience, or you have some friends that might be interested in learning who we are, but really want to avoid the church thing a little bit, invite them to Zoom Playground. It's a really good way to break into the current break-in. And then, of course, online church, we have Wired Word every Sunday at 9, and then our God Connect service that we're still developing here as a community every Sunday at 10:15. And then please don't forget to sign up for the mailing list or to send your friends to gowiththecurrent.org if they want to learn more about us. Finally, we have a congregational meeting coming up in a couple of weeks on July 7th at 7 p.m. It will be here in our virtual church. Please put this in your calendars. We really need to discuss the future of our whole community as we move on. We're once again at this place where God is doing new things. We've been here before. It's not going to be unusual for anybody who's been in this church for a while. But together, we need to determine sort of what we want to look like and who we are going forward. I think it'll be a really neat conversation, and I'm hoping that all sorts of great ideas will bubble up from it. So please write down a congregational meeting for July 7th. It says 5 p.m. I'm sure it should be 7 p.m. July 7th at 7. Wow, typo. Who did that? I'll fire them. Finally, I'd like to remember that we are a community-supported organization. Even though we are a member church of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, our financing comes 100% from us. And as I've been reminded lately, we give to the church not merely to support the institution, but as a way to give back to God's great goodness. God gives us everything freely. This whole reality comes from God without any expectation of return other than the 10% that's mentioned in the Bible. So if we can give 10% of ourselves, not just our earnings, but ourselves to the current, that will really help us thrive in the future. So I hope you will all consider tithing on a regular basis. I would also like us to consider some new and perhaps unique ways to generate revenue for a church that maybe weren't possible thousands of years ago, or maybe even a decade ago. Now is the time for us to really be imaginative. And while we all give everything we have, perhaps there are other ways also to get other people or organizations or patrons to also support this really unique thing that we're doing now online as well. Let's see what else. Yes, finally, don't forget to invite some friends. We have a lot of different ways for people to connect to our church, either at these services or the Wednesday Intersect and also the Zoom Playground. Also, I am always available to talk to anybody anytime. You know me, you can't get me to shut up. So if you have friends that would like to meet on a more one-to-one basis, just let me know. Send me an email or a text or give me a phone call. I will meet anybody in our virtual church, and I'm happy to come see all of you as well and meet outside and hang out for a little bit too. I've been kind of getting back out and met some people at church last week, and I'm pretty comfortable outside now. So if any of you would like a visit, just let me know. I'd love to see you. Although I can't really make it like to New Jersey or something like that, but anybody local that really wants to get together in person, please just let me know. What else? I think that's it, actually. Would you like to let's just do our unison closing prayer. It's been a long service. I really appreciate everybody staying in the church as our services go longer. But it doesn't feel long to me because it's all so invigorating. So I appreciate it very much. Let's join our voices together one more time in our unison closing. Life-giving source of our material world, we're filled with the joy of your presence. As we enter a world full of challenges, keep us in mindful bliss and surround us with love. We pray, as always, in your many names and images. Amen. Thank you all very much for being with us today. God bless you all throughout the week. We will see you again throughout the week at all of our different things. Peace be with you.